I'm very glad to be able to open this forum this morning. It was a little bit of a surprise. I think the program order had changed, but I'm happy to do so, and I welcome you in this beautiful room. And although my topic is not really climate change related, I hope you don't mind, because I still think it's a very important topic. And as we are here located in Bucharest, which has experienced already many severe and damaging earthquakes, I think the topic of earthquake risk will be equally interesting to you and important to you. I would like to tell you something about the lessons learned from the Christchurch earthquakes, which took place in 2010 and 2011. And although this is already quite a while ago, this topic is still important for us because we see that the claim settlement from these events are still ongoing, even today. The first event, it was a magnitude 7 event, occurred in September 2010, so 5 years ago by now. And it was followed by an event which was smaller in magnitude, but much more closer to the city center of Christchurch. And this was the main loss-driving event, actually, and it occurred in February 2011. And within the following month, over more than a year, some more aftershocks occurred, which were damaging and caused some losses again. As an introduction, this graphic might be familiar to you. It shows the insured catastrophe losses starting in 1970 up to 2014. And the color coding distinguishes between geophysical events, so earthquake and tsunamis, and weather-related catastrophes. And in yellow, you also see insurance losses from man-made disasters. Of course, the loss history is mainly driven by weather-related catastrophes, which are mainly hurricanes, but not all of them, but most of them. But we also see some earthquake losses, some large earthquake losses sticking out. The first really large insurance loss from an earthquake was the 1995 Northridge earthquake. And then, of course, as you can see in the most recent years, in 2010 and 2011, there were quite significant losses from earthquakes due to the events in Japan, in New Zealand, and also in Chile. Just as a summary, the largest insured losses from earthquake, these figures come from our Swiss Re Sigma database, and the figures the tsunami loss, and the total insurance loss is currently estimated at almost 37 billion US dollars. The second largest insured loss from an earthquake still is the 1994 loss from the Northridge earthquake in California. It was a magnitude 6.7 earthquake, and in today's prices, it equals around 22 billion US dollar. On the third rank is now the earthquake series from Christchurch, or especially this event in February, a magnitude 6.3 earthquake. This earthquake itself is estimated to have generated losses in the order of around 17 billion US dollar. But as I said before, the claim settlement is still ongoing, so the figures are still rising. The current estimates for this whole Christchurch earthquake series is estimated to be around 25 billion US dollars at the moment. And the reason why this loss is so high, this is one topic of this presentation. The figure you see on the left-hand bottom, it shows the location of the earthquakes compared to the location of the city center. And this large star On the left-hand side of this figure, this was the main event, a magnitude 7 event, which occurred further away from the city center and did not cause the majority of the losses. We currently think that from these 25 billion losses, only about 5 to 6 billion are due to this first main shock. The lost driving event was then the February 2011 earthquake, which occurred really close to the city center, and it occurred in a very shallow depth, although it is a moderate earthquake magnitude, but due to its shallow depth, it caused significant ground shaking, and therefore it caused significant damages in the city center. One effect all of the earthquakes triggered was soil liquefaction. This occurs mainly in the areas near any water bodies. And on this right-hand side, you can see a figure with a map of the city center and the city area, and you see these red zones. And in all of these red zones, the soil liquefaction was so badly that the government decided that these properties should not be used anymore, and all residents need to be relocated. So the government decided that it's too dangerous to live on these properties anymore, because each event triggered the same liquefaction. It came up through the same mud volcanoes, basically, in the backyards, and this is why the residents had to be resettled and had to leave their homes. This is also one reason we will see later why this loss is so tremendously from these events. This figure shows you the claims development over time, starting with the time of the February event in 2011, and the end of the timeline on the x-axis is end of December 2014. And the little symbols are the loss estimates from the earthquakes and any new earthquakes that occurred. And as you can see, the initial loss estimates are really much, much lower than the claims status we have at the moment. These initial loss estimates come from all sorts of vendor estimates, and the upper estimate right in the beginning after the events was about $8 billion US, and the final claims figure, the status we see at the moment, is more than twice above this. And as a comparison, for example, in Japan and for the Chile earthquake in 2010, 75% of the claims were able to be settled within less than 1 year. But for these New Zealand events, it took more than 3 years to get to the same point of settling about 75% of these claims. So then, of course, if we look at this figure, we ask ourselves, what was the problems with the loss estimates? Why are the initial loss estimates so low? Of course, the initial loss estimates are purely model-based. What did the models miss? And which drivers, loss drivers we saw, which no one really calculated in at the time? So what did the earthquake models miss? And this was not just from a single model, it was from all the earthquake models that are around in the industry. All of them underestimated this loss or these losses from the earthquake series. The first point, which is already very important, is the sheer number of claims. These damaging events occurred for more than a year, basically. And across all these events, there were more than 40,000 claims, although it is a rather small city. And the EQC, the New Zealand Earthquake Commission, was well prepared. They are a well-organized organization, but they simply did not have enough claims adjusters. So they ordered claims adjusters from foreign countries, mostly from Australia, but this was a problem as well because the Australian loss adjusters were still busy at the time with settling the claims from the Brisbane floods. But many of them came over to New Zealand to help their colleagues. And they had so much work to do that on some days 13,000 assessments were handled per day by 350 assessors. So you must imagine that one assessor had to look at 37 claims per day. So you can imagine that there's not much time to look at the real damage per property. So the loss adjusters only had a couple of minutes basically throughout the day. And within this time range, you can only see the damages visible to the outside, of course, but not really the structural damages within any walls. Because of this large number of foreign loss adjusters, there was also a lack in continuity. All of this led to a very slow claims processing, and it also led to the fact that by now, or in the past years, many of these claims had to be reopened again because the homeowners noticed that they did not get a sufficient payout because the damages were larger than anticipated by the loss adjusters, or also one reason was that many homeowners noticed that their neighbors, for example, they received a larger payout because they simply had another loss adjuster. So they reopened the claim, and the processes with the insurance companies are still ongoing for some of these claims. The second important reason why we saw these large losses were the policies and the wordings. So the EQC provides a mandatory coverage, but many homeowners bought additional cover from private insurance companies. So many properties were covered actually by more than one policy, which really delayed the claims process. And many of these policies actually covered the full replacement costs and not the sum insured of the building. So the replacement values were in the end much higher than the sums insured. One reason was also because the New Zealand government massively tightened the building codes after these events. So any reconstruction of buildings were much more expensive than anticipated before. And the insurance companies had to pay out this new replacement value. And this, of course, also played a role when modeling the initial loss based on the sums insured, of course, everyone had in the portfolio, but the real values were much larger. The third reasons were what we call secondary loss agents. As I told you before, this was the widespread liquefaction, so it ended in quite significant costs for land restoration. Many slope instabilities occurred, so there were landslides and rockfalls which damaged properties. There was this continued aftershock activity, and we still see today that it's very difficult to allocate the losses correctly to these different events. And most insurance companies tended to allocate most of these events to this February earthquake in 2011, simply because it generated the largest losses anyway. But now many insurance companies notice that their reinsurance protection, their per event covers, might not have a large enough exit point. So now the discussions are ongoing whether it is possible to reallocate the losses to the real events, and if it's possible to actually find out which earthquake generated which loss. And this, of course, even especially 5 years ago, was very, very difficult. What also happened in Christchurch was the shutdown of the central business district. This was damaged quite a lot. So many commercial commercial risks. They were not able to operate for several months. I think the central business district was closed for more than 1 year, actually. And all the offices, they had to find new office spaces to continue their business. As a summary, the Christchurch events, although 5 years ago, still provide valuable lessons for all of us, I think. And these were small quakes, which basically can happen everywhere, and especially if they happen in a very shallow depth and near any value accumulations, then we can see tremendous losses from these events. And we learned that the insurance payout does not just depend on the physical damage to the property, because within this short amount of time, especially when you have many, many aftershocks, it's really difficult to assess them properly. So claims inflators we observed were the policy wordings, the sheer claims numbers, the process, the tightening of the building codes, for example, and these increased the ultimate payout. Swiss Re has summarized these findings in a publication, and this topic is also part of one study Swiss Re is still undertaking. It's called Mind the Risk Studies, which look at various places around the world and at various different natural perils as well. And we look at several what-if scenarios around the world, which we think are really helpful to get an overview what really could happen at certain places when a large earthquake strikes. The most recent publication is called Small Quakes, Big Event, Lessons Learned from Christchurch. It was published in 2014. We published another one in 2012, the lessons from recent major earthquake, and then the last, the mentioned Mind the Risk study from Swiss Re. They are all publicly available on our website. If you go to the Swiss Re website, the library tab, you can download them for free.